The early morning mist hung over the streets of Madrid as Cristiano Ronaldo completed his usual 6 a.m. run through the Retiro Park area, a routine that had become sacred to him regardless of his training schedule, travel commitments, or the demands of his professional obligations. As he slowed to a walking pace near the park's eastern entrance, following his customary cool-down routine that helped prevent injury and maintain his legendary physical condition, Ronaldo noticed an elderly man sitting on a bench with his head in his hands, clearly in profound distress that went far beyond ordinary sadness or temporary disappointment. The man appeared to be homeless, with worn clothing that showed signs of long-term wear, a small collection of belongings packed into a tattered backpack beside him, and the weathered appearance that comes from extended exposure to outdoor living conditions and the stress of surviving without stable housing or reliable access to basic necessities. What struck Ronaldo most powerfully was the profound sadness emanating from this solitary figure who seemed completely overwhelmed by some personal crisis that had left him emotionally devastated and apparently without hope or direction. As Ronaldo approached cautiously, not wanting to intrude on what was obviously a private moment of grief, but genuinely concerned about the man's obvious distress and potential need for assistance, he could hear the stranger talking to himself in a voice filled with desperation, self-recrimination, and the kind of heartbreak that comes from losing something irreplaceable. "Buddy, where are you? I'm so sorry. I should have held the leash tighter. I should have been more careful. Please come back to me. You're all I have left in this world. You're the only family I have." The words revealed that this man had lost his dog, and the anguish in his voice made it immediately clear that this was far more than just a missing pet. This animal was apparently his sole companion, his primary source of emotional support, and perhaps the most important relationship in his life. Ronaldo sat down on the bench at a respectful distance, maintaining enough space to avoid making the distraught man feel crowded or threatened, while positioning himself close enough to offer help if it would be welcomed. "Excuse me, sir. I couldn't help but notice you seem very upset. Did you lose your dog?" he asked gently, using a tone that conveyed genuine concern without pressure or judgment about the man's obvious homeless status or emotional state. The homeless man looked up with tear-filled eyes, initially startled by being approached by a stranger, but responding to the genuine concern and respectful manner in Ronaldo's voice, rather than the indifference or hostility that he had learned to expect from most people during his years of living on the streets. "Yes, his name is Buddy. He's a small brown and white terrier mix, about 8 years old, with one ear that flops forward and a distinctive black patch around his left eye. We've been together for 5 years now, ever since I lost my apartment and ended up on the streets after my disability benefits were cut and I couldn't keep up with rent payments. He's the only family I have left, the only living being that cares whether I live or die. And this morning, while we were taking our usual walk around the park, a loud truck backfired nearby and scared him badly. He pulled the leash right out of my hands with a strength I didn't know he had and ran into the thick woods area of the park. I've been searching everywhere for over 3 hours now, calling his name and checking every possible hiding place, but I can't find him anywhere, and I'm terrified that something terrible has happened to him." The man's name was Eduardo Vega, and his story emerged gradually as Ronaldo listened with patience, compassion, and genuine interest in understanding the circumstances that had led to this crisis. Eduardo had been a construction worker for most of his adult life, taking pride in his ability to build and repair structures that would last for generations, until a serious workplace injury damaged his back and left him unable to perform the physical labor that had been both his livelihood and his identity for over 30 years. Without income and lacking family support or adequate social services, he had eventually lost his housing and found himself living on the streets with only Buddy as his constant companion and source of emotional stability. The dog had become far more than a pet. He was Eduardo's emotional support system, his protection during vulnerable moments, his motivation for getting up each morning, and his reason for continuing to hope that better days might lie ahead, despite the seemingly insurmountable challenges of homelessness poverty, and social invisibility. The bond between them was so strong that Eduardo often went without food to ensure that Buddy was fed properly, and he had been known to refuse offers of indoor shelter during harsh weather if dogs were not permitted in the facility, preferring to remain outside with his companion rather than abandon the one relationship that gave his life meaning and purpose. Ronaldo was deeply moved by Eduardo's obvious devotion to his dog and immediately understood that finding Buddy was not just important, but absolutely crucial to this man's emotional well-being, mental health, and possibly his will to continue surviving the difficult circumstances of his daily existence. Eduardo, my name is Cristiano. I want to help you find Buddy, and I'm not going to leave until we locate him safely. Can you describe exactly where he ran when he got scared, what direction he was heading when you last saw him, and any places in the park where he might go to hide when he's frightened? Ronaldo's offer to help came without hesitation or any apparent concern for how this might affect his own schedule, training routine, or professional obligations, and his use of Eduardo's name and respectful tone immediately established a connection that transcended their obvious differences in social and economic status. For the next several hours, Ronaldo abandoned his planned activities for the day and joined Eduardo in a systematic search of Retiro Park and the surrounding neighborhoods that covered several square miles of urban territory where a small, frightened dog could easily become lost or hidden. They walked every trail, checked under every bush and behind every tree, looked in drainage areas and maintenance buildings, and asked every park worker, jogger, dog walker, and early morning visitor they encountered if anyone had seen a small brown and white terrier who appeared to be lost or distressed. Ronaldo's presence and obvious concern for Eduardo's situation encouraged others to join the search effort, and soon a small group of volunteers was helping to cover more territory and increase the chances of finding Buddy before he could come to harm or wander so far from the park that recovery would become virtually impossible. As the search continued through the morning and into the early afternoon, Eduardo shared more details about his relationship with Buddy and the circumstances that had brought them together during some of the darkest moments of his life. He had found Buddy as a young puppy, abandoned and malnourished in an alley behind a restaurant where Eduardo was searching for discarded food, and the immediate connection between them had provided both with companionship and purpose during a time when Eduardo was struggling with depression, substance abuse issues related to his chronic pain, and the social isolation that often accompanies homelessness. Caring for Buddy had given Eduardo a reason to stay sober, maintain his health, and continue functioning even when his own circumstances seemed hopeless, while Buddy had received the love, protection, and consistent care that had transformed him from a sick, abandoned puppy into a healthy, well-behaved companion who brought joy not only to Eduardo, but to many other homeless individuals and park regulars who had come to know and appreciate their partnership over the years. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just as Eduardo was beginning to despair that they would never find Buddy and starting to prepare emotionally for the devastating possibility that his beloved companion was gone forever, they heard a faint barking sound coming from a heavily wooded area near the park's northeastern corner, where the vegetation was thick enough to provide hiding places for a small animal. Following the sound carefully through underbrush and around fallen logs, they discovered Buddy trapped in a drainage culvert where he had apparently sought shelter after becoming frightened, but had then become unable to climb back out due to the smooth concrete walls and his own exhaustion from hours of stress and attempted escape. The reunion between Eduardo and Buddy was intensely emotional, with both man and dog displaying obvious relief, joy, and mutual affection that moved everyone present to tears and demonstrated the profound bond that had sustained them both through years of difficult circumstances. Buddy was unharmed, but clearly shaken by his ordeal, while Eduardo wept openly as he held his companion and expressed gratitude not only for Buddy's safe return, but for Ronaldo's willingness to spend an entire day helping a homeless stranger search for his lost dog without any expectation of recognition or reward. However, Ronaldo's assistance didn't end with finding Buddy. Over the following days and weeks, he quietly arranged for Eduardo to receive support services, including temporary housing, medical care for both him and Buddy, assistance with disability benefit applications that had been improperly denied, and eventually permanent housing in a facility that welcomed pets and provided the stability that Eduardo needed to rebuild his life. The experience of helping Eduardo and witnessing the power of the human-animal bond in sustaining hope and dignity under the most challenging circumstances became one of Ronaldo's most cherished memories and influenced his ongoing charitable work with homeless individuals and animal welfare organizations. Years later, Eduardo would often visit schools and community centers to share his story and emphasize how the kindness of one person who took time to help a stranger had transformed not only his immediate crisis, but his entire life trajectory, while Buddy continued to serve as his beloved companion and reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, hope and love can prevail when people choose to care for one another across all social and economic boundaries.